All right, let's see. Guess I'll put that there. Oh. Where the hell is my stream? How did I find this last time? Oh, there we go. Hopefully this is it. Okay, there we go. Nice, nice. All right, nice. Okay, now I'm going to start sharing this, and then we can get started. Okay, that went through. Awesome. Okay, let's see. No one's in just yet, that's fine. Give a few more minutes before I start yapping. see. Da da da. Oh yeah, I meant to get music up and running. Let's see if I can do that. Media source. Background music. Let's see. Where did I put that? Oh, I guess I didn't have it ready. Oh, that's fine. I'll have it ready next time. I'm not gonna waste time editing audio right now. Just one more minute. Certainly happy the avatar that I made worked out. Everything looks good. Okay, it's 3:05. Let's get started. All right. Hello to all viewers, both live and who will be watching this in the future on the VODs. It's nice to see you all live and in person for once. I'm Kim. You might know me from the Where the Strays Roam webtoon. At least I certainly hope that's why you're here, otherwise I don't know how you found me. But I decided I wanted to do, as a reward for people who are so generous enough to donate to me, to do a few live production live streams once a week so people can watch me in the process of actually making this thing. Now, I'm a few chapters ahead of what everyone who reads the comic on Webtoon has currently seen, because I'm trying to have a nice, backlog of some chapters so that if something happens, I'm sick or I'm suddenly called away to do something and I won't be able to work on the comic for a little while, I'll still have stuff to upload even when I'm not actively working. So this is technically a couple chapters into the future too, I believe. But there shouldn't be any spoilers. I'm not going to let you guys see the script or anything. It's just going to be out of context images. I posted a work in progress of this one earlier this morning, but you can see now I've completely finished it. Final lines and coloring. And the goal today is to complete these 4 panels right down here that I've already done the slightly less rough sketches for. If you want to see the rough sketches, this is what the rough sketches look like. Just completely unintelligible blobs and shapes that only I understand. Only I know the vision for this right now. Usually the first step is to refine the sketch a little bit, like this. I like to use colored lines because it helps things stand out a little more. Usually backgrounds I'll do in this kind of greenish teal color, characters in a blue so that they stand out a little bit more. And then I'll usually refine that with another sketch on top of that, which we'll get to in a minute, So, got a nice variety here today. We've got some mid shots like this one, some close-ups of faces, one that's just a full background, and then this one that's a full background and group shot. So you'll sort of get to see every bit of my process today. Ideally, we'll get all of these done today. Alright, let's begin then. Alright. I'll try to keep one eye on the chat. If anyone asks me questions, where is it? Okay, it's this one. Here we go. Let's see, nothing yet. Alright. So these panels are kind of nice to work on because they're in like a sort of a cave setting. I find it's actually pretty easy for me to make. The backgrounds for this comic, I do them in a pretty painterly style. There we go. I usually like to start off by blocking things out with solid colors before going back and refine them later. So this is sort of the color for the ground plane. And we'll do the rest of the hallway in the background. So we'll start out with a lighter blue for some more contrast. So one layer of walls and another. Look at that. Alright. Next, so this environment is actually inside of like an office room. Because, you know, for those who are up to date with the comic, that's where they are right now. They're inside of a giant office building that has sunk into the ground. Which, you know, I think that's a pretty fun idea for an environment. But at least there's some fun stuff like, you know, shelters that are both man-made and organic. So you've got like one half of it that's like an office table. Oh, this is the vector eraser. I was doing some work with vectors earlier. No, we want the standard eraser so that it's not so pixelated. The edges are a little more gradual, you know? Turn the opacity for that down so I can see a little better. Alright. Boop. Yeah, like that. That's why you don't want to use the vector eraser on a non-vector layer. Alright. And then the actual dirt. And that makes this up, because half of this room is completely collapsed. So there's sort of dirt piled up everywhere, which was advantageous in this case, because it meant that they could dig out a little spot to make somewhere safe to sleep, you know? I mean, it seems a little far-fetched that anything could really have made its way into this half-sunken building, but, you know, in the world that they live in, you can never be too safe about that sort of thing. Okay, let's see. Line that up a little bit, because I want it to get darker as we go here. There, that's good. That's good. Alright, I think we'll have it get darker as it comes closer to the camera. I mostly just try to use varying gradients of color, light and dark, to add greater depth to the piece. Backgrounds are kind of a back and forth struggle because on the one hand, I want to have nice looking backgrounds, but on the other hand, I can't spend forever just painting the backgrounds, otherwise I'd never get any of this comic done, ever. So I feel like I've developed a decent method for how I do that, which is mostly just like, you know, these gradient strokes. And then, you know, I think about what details would best emphasize the environment, make it feel more realistic and also more interesting to look at. That's the most important thing to me, of course, that this be interesting to look at, you know. The ultimate quality is maybe a little less important than just it being something that people look at and go, oh, that's cool. It's like this is one detail. I just add a multiply layer, and I'll go in with the same dark blue color, and I'll create these little splotches on the ground that are supposed to represent like grime and water damage that have lingered over the years. I really like to use the fingertip blender for this, because when you swipe it back and forth, it really creates that more natural look of something having been smeared across the ground here. Then I'll also turn down the opacity so that these blend in with the actual floor a little bit more. And there, it already looks like it's got, you know, this feels more like a floor with age and wear on it than, you know, the pristine look that it would have had back when the humans were still around. I don't name every single layer. I find that kind of time consuming and also somewhat unnecessary. I'll usually just collapse all of the layers that I've done for one object into a single folder here, like I did this, and then I'll just label the folder so that I know this is the floor, all the floor layers are in the floor folder. That makes sense. Alright, so I'll move on to the back wall. I usually just like to go in order of, you know, when I created them. This wall's pretty far back, so the details probably wouldn't be as visible, but I am still going to put, you know, still going to rough it up a little bit so that it feels like it's got a little bit of detail there. Otherwise it feels, you know, too pristine, like it doesn't fit. There we go. See, that's indistinct enough. I think that still registers as being in the distance. And I'm not sweating too much about these background walls, because they're really not going to be the focus. In fact, I think, yeah, Kip like almost covers it up completely, so. I will rough this wall up a little bit, make the silhouette of it less perfect. Gives that idea of this location, once again, not being in its best shape ever. And I like to pay attention to where the object I'm painting is meeting other objects in the image, because the best use for this kind of color shading is to help really differentiate one object from another. So you use the colors contrasting against each other to sort of make them stand out from one another. It's like I'm making this part here really dark so that the dirt that's in the foreground really pops off of it. And that's easy to tell. Oh yeah, this object is in front of this other object. Alright. Now more gross stains for this wall too. Alright. I actually think I need to go put some more color layers on this wall here, because you can't really tell where that back wall ends and the first wall begins. Okay. Okay, that's a little more contrast. And we'll get more contrast once I put the final layer of shadows on things. Okay, table is the next bit. So I'm going to turn this back on because this table's got two pieces. And I want to make sure that I'm shading it correctly so that the division of those pieces is easy to see. See, even with just like one layer of extra color on it, it already looks has so much more depth than when it was just one solid color. And usually to help pick out which color, I just make use of the color wheel or the color square. I prefer the square to the actual circle, but you can, this program only does square or triangle. I usually just make it darker and slightly more saturated version of the same color, just so that the shadows feel kind of rich. If you go desaturated, you run the risk of them getting kind of gray and muddy, which isn't always what you want. You know, the environment that they're in is very cold, dark, and damp, which is why there is a lot of desaturated blues in these backgrounds, but I do still want it to feel vibrant and interesting, not completely dour, you know. Alright, I'm gonna put one extra bit of shading for that crease where the top of the table meets the base, just so that that bit there is extra defined, because that's where the shadow is going to be the darkest, where that transition is. There. Table. And last but not least, the dirt that makes up this second wall here. Oh, I forgot, there is some moss visible on the outside. I'll do that next. I found that doing like dirt and earth and rocks can actually be pretty fun, because you really just gotta pay attention to things like how, you know, because this is a pile of earth that, no, wrong blending style there, that Kip the Fox has dug out a hole into. So it's got these like swooping, very much layered walls where like the dirt's sort of overlapping on each other. It's not like a smooth, uniform scoop out. So that's why I'm doing shading. That's trying to define these crease shapes in the dirt. It's gonna look like, oh yeah, some parts of the dirt stick out farther than other parts. Put a few darker shadows in the middle to just sort of give the impression of, like, you know, digging marks, claw marks that would have been left behind from Kip's digging on this part here. Alright. One more layer, I think. I want to try to define it from the ground a little bit more here. It's blending in too much. That is the other problem of working with these very dark colors. Sometimes once it all starts getting a little too dark, they all kind of run into each other. And see, that's the beauty of art. You know, I'm, 52 chapters in to making this comic, and I'm still finding things that are like, that doesn't look very good. I should figure out how to do that better, you know? I've learned so much about color interaction from working on this. Way more than I learned in, color theory class in college. Which was a great class, mind you, but nothing beats hands-on experience with something, you know? It's fine for someone to tell you how contrasting and complementing colors work, but it doesn't really click until you've actually tried to use them in something, and you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I see why that does or doesn't work now. All right. Dirt. Now we can't forget the moss, which is going to go behind the wall and the table. The moss is perhaps the thing that stands out the most in most scenes, because it's such a different color from everything else. Love decorating shots with moss, it's so much fun. I think it actually needs to be a little bit darker. Boop. Now I will say, if you're gonna be doing anything that has naturalist stuff in it, like bushes, trees, foliage, things like that, definitely invest in looking for some foliage texture brushes, because that'll be such a huge lifesaver and time saver. For free on the Clip Studio community pages, I found these variety of fluff and tree brushes here, and I use them for pretty much all the foliage in the shots that I do. And it has been such a time saver as opposed to having to recreate this texture myself all the time. Makes it a lot easier on the workload. Alright, so that's the basic background. You guys can't see this because it's not visible in the window, but I've got some of my reference images pulled up for the comic that have things like the shading palette that I use. So I've got this one particular color saved that I use for all the shadows, which I will now use to add the final layer of lighting. There's a difference between shading the objects and then lighting the objects. Lighting is what sort of helps unify everything, makes it look like it's actually inhabiting the same environment. And it's how you can create effects like things casting shadows across multiple objects. Stuff like that. I learned a long time ago that it's usually a good principle to not use straight black for your shadows, for your lighting. You want to give the shadows some kind of color. Usually it's either blue or purple most of the time. In this case, for Rising Waters, the main shadow color is this dark navy blue. With the layer set to multiply. Of course, multiply is your friend. You know, use multiply. Alright. Just that little extra bit. Adds so much more depth to this piece. Oh, and that shows I didn't erase that wall very well. We can go back and fix that. Oh, wait. Wrong brush. I was blending them. There. Much more defined. I always like shading the floor because it's amazing how much more depth you can add with just like a simple like circle outline like this, you know. Shading the edges while leaving the center the lighter color. It's like instant depth. It's great. Now this is also usually where I'll think about, oh, where are like the really harsh shadows coming from? Is anything gonna cast like something super prominent? And I think probably it's gonna be the table, most likely. Usually for this I'll use the line tool, because I really want like a straight edge for the most part, because that's just how the table looks. So, you know, straight edge there, across the ground, up tap. But casting over the dirt, it's gonna be more naturalistic, sort of following those natural curves that the dirt has. Don't usually break out the brush for that part. All right. Turn down the opacity on that too. And then I usually come in with the blur tool and I'll just feather the edges so they're not super harsh. Usually looks a lot cleaner when it's a lot more naturalistic too when you do that. All right, there we go. And I'll just throw everything into another folder and call it the background. All right, now we can move on to the really fun part, placing the characters. Ground planes, which is what this layer is, super helpful with perspective, highly recommend. All right. Turn down opacity on the background so I can see a little better. All right, so this is Kip in this shot, giving a thumbs up, which foxes can definitely do. Oh, no, wrong brush. There we go. So because faces and expressions are usually pretty complex, I'll do a separate rough sketch specifically for the expression to make sure that everything really looks good and proportional before I start doing the final sketch. So he's supposed to be looking smug in this shot, which is pretty normal for him. I'd say that's his resting state, is smug. Yeah, with these pointed eyes, it really just helps with his level of smugness. Nice. And then I usually do rough sketch for the paws too, because paws can also be a little bit complex, so. Foxes can't really give thumbs up, so we're gonna play with the anatomy a little bit. So we'll have him, sticking up his dew claw in approval of whatever he's looking at right now, which I will not spoil. That looks like shit. Never be afraid to erase if it's just not working. This is supposed to be kind of cartoony shot, so we'll leave it at that, I think. We'll call that good enough. Alright. Final sketch time. This is where I lay out all the details, make sure he's on model. It's not visible on stream, but I've got his character sheet up in another window, so I can reference it as I am crafting him. Although the character sheets I do for my comic don't have a ton of information, or at least not as much information as you would do if you were, I don't know, say making an animated film or something. You probably have like full turnarounds and things for that, but with this webcomic I really just don't have the time to go that in depth with it. I usually just draw the characters, one pose, create a color palette, call it good. And, you know, if there is an angle that they're not visible from on the character sheet, I'll kind of just make it up on the fly. It makes some moments more difficult, like when I end up having to reference actual chapters from the comic. Because I'm trying to draw the character from the same angle, but I can't remember what they look like from that angle, so I look up if I've already drawn them like that, and have to reference straight from that. Which is more time consuming than having a character sheet, but tends to work out fine in the end. I have a pretty good memory for my characters' basic shapes and things. It's not a huge detriment to the workflow. This big fluffy fox tail. It's not a fox without a big fluffy tail. All right. Thinking maybe we change the angle of this a little bit now. Yeah, that looks better, actually. A lot more natural. Alright, there's one smug fox. Now I get to delete all of these lower layers because I don't need them anymore. Delete. There. Alright. Now, final line work and color. Whatever Kip is looking at must be pretty amusing. What am I saying? You guys know what he's looking at. He's looking at this guy. All impressed with himself. I was pretty excited to start working on this story because I got to introduce the foxes in this one, which is a piece of world building that I really like. I'm big into fantasy, so I've had plenty of experience of stories with, you know, good political intrigue, different dynamics amongst the different groups that lived there. And I found that there was a good opportunity with Where the Strays Roam to do something similar by incorporating all these other wild animals into things. Do 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 do. So when I came up with the idea for the rivalry between cats and foxes, I was very excited to get to a story where we could explore that a little more. Because it's not just these cats in particular, like Stone and Fern's group of cats that are having problems with foxes. every cat in the Spire is having problems with not just foxes, just about everything. Of course, we saw a little bit of that in part 1 when Shade encountered the raccoon, who tricked him into getting some food and then left him for dead. But you know, like the raccoon said, it's not personal, it's just survival. You know? He needed someone to get the food for him, but he also didn't want to risk either becoming a cat's meal or having to share the food with somebody else. That's just how it is in the wild. Something that the cats of the Spire are still coming to terms with. Humans may have been gone for some time, but domestication is in your bones. It takes a while to come back from something like that. Though, from my observations at least, and what I know about animals, cats probably have the best chance of rewilding out of any of our domestic creatures. Hence why they're the featured protagonists of this comic. That just brings to my mind the other thing I'm really excited to get to is dogs. But I won't speak too much on that. We'll save that for another story later on down the line. But I'm excited to reveal it. I know you guys are gonna either love/hate it a little bit, probably. We'll see what the fallout is, I guess. Coloring his feetsies. I hope the audio sounds okay on this. I don't really have a way to check. I'll probably go back and listen to this and then cringe at the sound of my own voice. I think it's funny that that's such a universal experience. Everyone cringes at their own voice. It can't be avoided. Alright. That's all of the flat colors done. The leg that's visible is his wounded leg, but with how it's tucked under him right now, you can't really see it. Alright. Next, line color. Masking layers are so useful for things like colored lines. You just drop the new color right on top of them. Little specks of white. Gives the eyes a little more life. Feels a little less flat. Now shading. I leave the eyes unshaded to give sort of the effect like they're glowing. Because, for those who may not be aware, both cats and foxes have night vision. So it's sort of a reference to that, and an imitation of how their eyes reflect in the light in the dark. Like when you point a camera at one and you get like the glowy eyes. Sort of what you got here, except you can still see them. I've also found it helps with keeping their expressions clear, just by how dark everything is in these shots. Then I'll take the blur tool and I'll feather the edges here as well. That's just a personal style preference. I like how it looks with the more feathered edges as opposed to the harsh, more cell shading style. Alright, there's Kip. Put him in his own folder. So that everything looks all neat and tidy. And that's Kip with 2 P's. Alright, then I usually like to put in a shadow underneath the characters too. Helps them feel like they're a part of the background a little bit more. Feather that out as well. Alright, and then last, but certainly not least, is the overlay layer. So on the overlay, I've got some colors on a swatch on another page that I'm pulling from here. But I'll usually put this lighting gradient in. And what this does is it just puts sort of like a filter on top of everything in the shot. And it helps unify the colors. Turn the opacity on it way down. It's just supposed to be a very subtle touch of blue-green over everything. But it helps unify the colors, makes it feel like, they are all belonging in the same space. They're all experiencing the same lighting, this very cool bluish lighting. And that's on every panel in here, no matter what is in it. Alright, I'm going to take a quick swig of water and we'll move on to the next one. If anyone does hop in while I'm not paying attention, feel free to leave comments in chat. I'll answer them when I am able. Alright. Next is a close-up shot of Fern. I actually do need the script open for this, but I won't show it to you. That part's for my eyes only. I need to have an idea of what she's saying so I know what expression to give her. Okay. Gonna move it up a little bit. Feels like her mouth is a little too close to the bottom edge there. Creates a bit of an awkward composition. Okay, let's begin. These kinds of shots are honestly my favorite. Mostly because if it's an extreme close-up of a character's face while they're saying something, I just straight up won't put a background. I just get to focus on the part that I really enjoyed doing, which is drawing the characters. That's always been my favorite part. It's probably every artist's favorite part. At least, I imagine if you're making comics, it's probably because you really like your characters. So, probably a safe bet to say that they're your favorite thing to draw in the comic. We're going for kind of a determined look, although that might look a little more evil than determined. See, expressions are very tricky. That's why I like to sketch them out lightly first before I settle on anything. I think I need a reference for this one. Going to Google Images. Let's see. Google Images is your friend. Okay. Okay, so the eyebrows are actually up, but the eyes are more narrowed. I guess that makes sense. That's also kind of weird. This is the other hard part. I'll spend forever tweaking out these expressions. Looks almost cross-eyed in that. Her jaw feels off now. Feels like it's swinging way too far to the side. I think I want... doesn't feel quite happy. No, that doesn't quite get it across either. Maybe we will do eyebrows down. Just doesn't look like her. Scrapping it. Never be afraid to scrap a drawing and start it again. Sometimes clearing the canvas is the only way to get around an issue you're having. Right. We'll curl it up at the cheeks. That might help a little bit. That expression also feels like too much. Maybe we'll scrap that expression altogether. Go something a little more neutral. That actually. That one works, I think. Yeah. Okay, let's see how that looks. Maybe I won't do the cheek indent on that. Might be making it a little too harsh. The subtle expressions can actually be the really difficult ones, because it only takes the slightest mistweak of a feature to have the whole thing feeling off in some way. Here's an idea. How's that look? Kinda got the idea. Oof. Usually you can bust through the headshot panels pretty quickly, but this one's giving me some trouble. Nah, I think we should just do the fully open eyes. There. I think that's gonna work best. I'm gonna change the eyebrows one more time. See if I like it. That works, actually. Yeah, it doesn't look bad. Okay, we'll go with that. Is OBS picking that up? There's some emergency sirens going on outside. Of course, I don't know if those are going to something nearby or to help out with the wildfires. Sirens have been pretty constant this past month. You know, it was funny, the LA wildfire started up like the day I flew back in from visiting family over Christmas. Which, you know, just my luck, right? Like, and I'd gotten sick just before I was supposed to come home. So I actually ended up extending my stay by a couple of days. When I got here and then I saw that like the fires were going on and I was still feeling a little ill, I was like, man, I could have just extended my stay and like skipped all of this. But, you know, real life waits for no one. All right. I don't quite like it anymore. No. This is the worst thing that could have happened. Changing the expression on the final line stage. This is what I don't like doing. Ah, well. Maybe if we keep the eyes fully open and then don't rest the eyebrows directly on the eyeball. And I think the angle is too sharp. No. Okay, we're gonna go back to this layer. Fiddle around with the eyebrows some more. I think that works. I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and call it done eventually. You can't let yourself quibble over the imperfections forever, you know? Comics gotta get done at some point. Okay, I think I'm satisfied with that. I think that says, you know, proud of her work. I want more separation between the eye and the pupil here. There. Over here too. There. Don't want to looking completely cross-eyed. So yeah, for the backgrounds on these, I'll just usually do like a very simple color gradient with, you know, whatever the general color mood of the area that they're in which case it's very blue in here. So we'll do a blue background for this one. I usually like to start the base color in like a completely stark, unnatural color that's not in the palette at all. Mostly because this layer is just about filling in the whole space of the character, making sure there's no white pixels, no gaps anywhere. And then I'll lock the layer down and go over it with the actual base color. Then we just set the other layers to reference the base layer, and we can draw right on top without worrying about bleeding through the lines. Fern's design is probably one of my favorites so far, just because of the variety of colors and patterns that she's got. It's very fun to draw. I like designing cats with the more interesting coat patterns on them. Which some probably already knew that because my favorite character from Story 1 to draw was Whackjaw, and that man has so many colors. So many different colors. I'm sure his color palette would classify as like a torty or a calico, which is, you know, not usual for males. It's very rare to have a male calico or torty, but I don't really care about that when I'm designing cats for this series. I'm just going off whatever looks cool. And when I was designing Whackjaw, I was like, oh, this guy's kind of, you know, kind of goofy, kind of silly, kind of crazy. So I gave him a really disjointed and goofy color palette, which has ended up having a tricolor pattern in it. I'm not paying attention to actual cat genetics or cat coats when I'm making these. It's all for fun. You can say it's a genetic mutation after the bombs went off. By the way, if you're wondering if that was a lore drop, I'm not confirming anything. You will have to stick around and see. Alright. There she is. Fern. I usually just duplicate the solid shadow layer and then erase the parts where the light is touching, because the lighting in most of these areas inside of this building are supposed to be very dim. I'll do this a lot for night scenes or scenes underground or undercover when there's not much light and the only light that's in the area is most likely ambient anyways. I'll just do sort of this rim lighting effect here. Sort of produces that idea that they're somewhere dark. Alright. Put that all in a fern layer. Fern. Okay. And we'll do the overlay. Oh, part of the shadow didn't get feathered there. Let's fix that. There we go. Okay, everything else is good. Alright, so that's 2 frames done. I'm gonna take a quick 5-minute break, then I'll move on to the next one. We might not get to this last one today. It's already been almost 2 hours. I don't know how long I want to go with this. But, I'll be back in 5. Let me throw a BRB up here so anybody who comes in knows that I am gone at the moment. Okay, see y'all in 5. Alright, we're back. I have opened my window because it's actually getting kind of hot in here, which I guess just goes to show what living in California is like this time of year. Near the end of January, and I'm sitting here with my window open because it's too hot inside. Okay, let's get back to it. Alright, hopefully I can get this one out done pretty quickly, because this is just a background and a pretty simple one at that. It's really just the floor and then a couple of piles of moss, which should be easy. I certainly hope it's easy to do. Same principle with the first one, some simple shading. Four layers of shadow, just for that extra depth. Alright, now we'll do some texturing. I'll probably get a little more complex with it, just because, well, there's more floor to see, and we're seeing it closer to the camera than last time. Fingertip brush, push it all around. Try to get that gross, icky floor stain look. And another thing I'm trying to do here is follow the perspective grid lines, just so that the way the stains are flowing matches with the perspective of the shot. Because otherwise it'll actually flatten the picture out rather than adding to the depth. Alright. Okay. Another little technique. Let's see, where is that? No, it's not right. Ah, droplet, that's the right one. I like to use the droplet brush to create those little like dimples that you see in things like concrete. So start out like this. Usually duplicate the layer and then color it a much brighter color, or a lighter color. And pop it behind the first one. And if you scooch it just a bit to the right, or whichever direction it makes sense for the lighting to be in, it'll create this effect like there's little holes in the pavement. I think we gotta, yeah. I'm gonna have to actually make the color itself brighter, because lowering the opacity makes it see-through, and then you can see the lighter layer behind it and doesn't create the same effect. All right, so that gives it a little more texture to work with. Yeah, that sort of gets the idea of cross of what we're looking at. Floor. Now we can do the moss. Moss is fun. I like doing the moss. So when I'm doing things like moss, I'll usually make the bottom layer the darkest. So I'll work from dark to light, building it up that way. And you want to make sure that the shapes that it's making look very organic. Because what Fern has done here is she's just stamped the moss down into these flat little beds for them to sleep on. So they're not sleeping directly on this awful cold pavement that the building is made out of. You know, this shit's not carpeted. Not anymore, at least. It's been too long for that. Then you want to build on top with a second layer of a lighter green, keeping in mind where your light source is. So you can create this built on top of effect, you know? Things like moss or any sort of leafage, it's got like layers. There's some leaves that are being touched directly by the light and others hiding underneath that aren't. That's why I also leave these patches where the darker color is still visible through it. So you don't want to cover up the whole thing. I'll usually take a textured blender for this one. I like this running color on fiber because it's still got that kind of bristly, naturalistic texture that we're going for. And you want to shade the edge that's closest to the undercolor, so it turns into more of this gradual change from light to dark while still keeping a bit of that feathered edge going on. And you don't want to shade the harsher edge completely away, because where the light is on the top, it makes sense that that area there would be a little more defined. Of course, my style for these backgrounds is pretty painterly, so I'm not being super anal about you know, the crispness of the detail and the definition. We're kind of more just giving an impression that that's what this is, you know, rather than people being looking at it and going like, yeah, that's moss. They look and they're like, oh yeah, that looks like moss. That gives my mind the suggestion of moss. I believe it when the characters call it moss. That's kind of why I like doing things like moss, because it's easier than man-made, rigid, non-organic structures. And yeah, you just keep building with spots of light. But you can be a lot more loose with organic materials than you can with inorganic. That's kind of why when I made this setting, I wanted a post-apocalyptic one. Because then, sure, I had to draw buildings, but I could also cover them with grass. So it would be harder to see how bad I am at drawing buildings. Though I will say I have gotten better over the course of making this comic. Like, my art's improved so much from working on Where the Strays Roam, it's not even funny. You know, having a personal project that's sort of a reason for you to get up and practice your art every day, it helps. It helps a lot. Alright. Last detail for moss is that it kind of has these little sprigs that stick out of it that kind of look like grass. I don't know if they actually are grass or not, though. Just like these longer little fibers. Stick out here and there. Got some pushed flat, because this is moss that has been pressed down on and spread out. Not all of it's sticking up upright correctly. we have some moss beds. Super quick, super simple. Gonna get rid of the sketch lines now. Right, now the final shading, which is the thing that'll unify this piece a little more. Make sure to shade under the beds so that it looks like they're actually a part of this setting. Now I'll go over with the same leaf texture brush and do a harsher shadow right underneath. Because usually when one object is coming into contact with another like that, you'll get a very direct shadow right at the edge where they meet. A shadow that almost looks exactly like the object itself. Let's see. I'm gonna hit it just a little bit with the blending brush. But not too much. I don't want to completely erase all of that definition. Then a shading layer on the moss itself, just to get in that little bit of depth. Feather that with the same blending tool as well. Alright. And then, last, but certainly not least, the overlay layer. There. I think that's a little too harsh still. There. Alright. Okay, last one for the day. Got that one done pretty quickly. Alright. It's the same process for this one, so I'll probably be a little quieter while I'm doing this one. I hope the open window isn't generating too much ambient noise. I'll have to check after this. Might have to switch to headphones for these streams, if need be. Alright. I guess having ambient wind noises is better than no noises at all. But hopefully I'll have the music ready to go next time. See, it's amazing how just a few lines of color can give the impression of a wall of dirt. Oh, whoops. Hit a button. Hit a button, open Discord. That's the thing about having a touchscreen computer. Sometimes it likes to give you little program jump scares when you hit something by accident. I should really take Microsoft Edge off this thing, because I keep opening that tab by accident too. Poor Edge. Oft forgotten and rarely utilized. Well, I'm sure somebody likes you as a browser. A wall of dirt. I'm chewing through this one pretty quickly. Well, that's kind of what happens. You get into a working groove, and then before you know it, you're churning out panels like you're a machine. This is another background, though, that I'm not gonna put too much. I'm not gonna be too precious with it, because the main focus of this shot will be the characters and what they're doing. So that's the thing I'm gonna want to put more of the time into, because that's what I want people to focus on. As much as a comic should be a holistic experience, where, like, you know, backgrounds and characters and dialogue and story all kind of work in tandem with each other. Doesn't change the fact that there are priorities, shot to shot. And, you know, sometimes identifying those priorities and sticking to them can really help with workflow and speeding things up. I'll tell you what, though, my eyes are tired. I've been drawing at this computer all day. I'll be looking forward to getting some dinner. And then giving my eyes a rest. Ah, city life. Hearing strangers shouting outside of your window. Okay, now we can draw the characters. Yay! Kind of at a far distance, so I worry a little less about expressiveness in this one. Just gonna worry about making sure the proportions and such are correct. Alright, so there's Fern. We'll do Stone next. Stone's already plopping down into a nice loaf. Imagine he's letting out a nice sigh as they finally sit down on something soft. Just a reminder that they haven't rested at all since, well, the start of the story. Ever since the fight with the foxes, they've just been going. No rest. First time they've had rest in a while. They're just plopping right down. Meanwhile, Kip's doing the turnaround. Everybody's minding their own business right now. Now I get to draw his fucked up leg. Alas, there was no way they weren't making it out of that flood without someone having a serious injury. It's just unfortunate for Kip that it was him. I don't quite like this muzzle. I'm gonna redraw that. One of the things I find trickiest in a lot of these panels is sizing between the cats and the foxes. Because, I don't know, my instinct is to make the fox larger than the cats, but have you ever actually seen a picture of a cat and a fox right next to each other? A full-grown fox is only like a little bit larger than a full-grown cat. Which I didn't realize at first. Of course, what I ended up going with is that Kip is actually a slightly younger fox, so he and Fern and Stone are pretty much the same size. Stone and Fern aren't like old cats. I'd say they're probably like young adult. Like they've finished physically growing, but there's not a lot of life experience there yet. Kip's still got a little growing to do, though. His forehead is too big. We're gonna shrink that. Doing his spin. A little too close there. There we go. That looks much better. Delete these as I go. I feel like the cheeks are a little too fat. Stone's design has always been a little bit on the funkier side. He went through like 3 different coat patterns before I settled on this, like, what I'm calling a drizzled look. But the shape of his head, I was kind of going for a face shape that's more like, you know, an oriental short hair. Where it's like more pointed. They got like the really prominent cheekbones going on. Not exactly like that, just taking like some shapes from it. But I found that it's very hard to draw from certain angles. I actually really like this pose that Fern is in. It feels very fluid, almost like she's dancing or something. A lot of good movement in it. That's another art tip for you. Give yourself some back pats. Every once in a while. Keeps the morale up. Don't be afraid to look at something and say, oh, I like how I drew that. Stretch. And a quick water. Alright, can I finish this before the hour is up? Probably not. Coloring tends to take a while. But we'll see. What am I doing? The fill tool is your friend. As nice as it is to get those good, clean lines going right up to the outline, I don't know, sometimes speed is preferable. Oh wait, it doesn't go quite up to the paw. This is the usefulness of reference sheets. You can catch yourself on things like that. The only thing I think I don't keep an exact count of is how many stripes are on her tail. I kind of just do however many looks right for that given shot. Alright, there she is. Oh, I do gotta color in her lines. Oh, I forgot her nose. Can't forget the nose. That cute kitty button nose. That's what everybody likes. Alright. Stone, you're up next. It makes it sound like I'm taking them to the spa. Trying to give these cats a bath. One thing I will say in Stone's favor, his design is very simple. It's like 3 colors. His base coat, his top coat, and then his eyes. Although, speaking on the topic of accurate cat pelts or coat colors, I don't know what Stone would be classified as. I guess if I had to hazard a guess, this might be closest to like a silver tabby. They can have really thick stripes sometimes. It's not exactly the same, but it's probably the closest equivalent in real life. Too much. Yeah, much cleaner. Kip's facial pattern kind of uses his eyes as an anchoring point. So however the eyes are bending, that's sort of how the cream on his face will go too. I did have an interesting time designing all the fox characters. Because for the most part, all foxes pretty much look the same. They don't have like pattern varieties the way that cats do. So instead I put the variety in what specific color the fox is, and also what shape the patterns take. So like, you know, they've all got some level of orange, white, and black/brown. But the actual shades will vary, and how much of each part is covered by the different colors will vary. And some have different markings, like some have like the facial markings, like Kip's here, and some don't. Because that's a real thing with foxes too. Some of them will have like the tier line markings, others won't. It was kind of a unique challenge, trying to come up with ways to keep all of the foxes looking distinct while still keeping true to, you know, what foxes look like. While I may be snubbing accurate genetics or coat patterns, this is still supposed to be a more grounded story. Like, you're supposed to feel like that they're real animals, real plausible animals. So that's why I never try to go too wacky on the actual colors. You know, the patterns may be wild, but the colors are all generally ones that I feel like could exist. It's an interesting balance. But, you know, sometimes restriction is what helps you be the most creative. Oh yeah, I'm definitely not finishing this before the hour. That's fine. We'll go until I'm finished. Because we're very close. We're very close to finishing here. Oh, I forgot to put blood on his leg. Mark it up so you can tell that it's wounded. I got a funny series of comments on a chapter once where one reader said, "Oh, I love how you don't shy away from showing a little blood." And then another commenter immediately followed up with saying, well, I do. So I guess the audience can be of two minds about that. Well, I knew from the start I didn't want to shy away from showing violence. Because one of the main forces of conflict in this story is sort of the juxtaposition between the life that these cats came from and the lives that they're living now. So, even though in the comic it's never shown, the era when humans were still alive, well, we know what that looks like. Because we live in it. And we know how cushy our cats have it. So it's sort of that juxtaposition between what the reader's familiar with in terms of pet cats, and then what the world of the comic is sort of forcing these cats to go through. This sort of return to the savagery of nature. One of the reasons I think cats make such good protagonists for stories like this is because they occupy a very interesting spot on the food chain, because they're mid-tier predators. So that means that while they hunt and kill things, there are also things that hunt and kill them. Maybe nothing that has a diet specifically of cats, but if they get caught by something larger than them, they'll absolutely take that cat off the census. I think anybody who lives out here in California or anywhere where we have coyotes is familiar with that. Like, I've seen CCTV footage. A coyote will take a cat for a snack, no problem. They have no qualms about that. So you've got sort of this interesting lifestyle dynamic of being at some times predator and at other times prey. Which has led to the fact that cats are fighters. Like, they will go into a brawl at the drop of a hat. So like I said about that CCTV footage, you see these cats getting harangued by coyotes, but you also see the cats putting up one hell of a fight to not get eaten. And because they're hunters, they've got the natural weapons to do it with. And these crazy killer instincts, too. Like, cats can dodge snake bites. That's how fast they are. I'm gonna put an extra shadow layer under these moss beds, I think. So yeah, I think it just makes for good drama, good conflict, good stakes, because you've got a creature that has a believable amount of enemies that would try to put it in harm's way, but also that has the ability and the nature to fight like hell to keep that from happening. Which I think is actually pretty similar to humans. A lot of stories about humans are about us fighting the odds and simply refusing to die. Alright, we're almost finished. Just this last overlay. And we're done! Alright. Look at that. Look at the beautiful panels that we finished today. I still feel like this overlay is on too strong. Yeah, I forgot to turn it down. There we go. Much better. Alright, and to save. So we don't lose all of that progress. Alright, I think we'll call it there for today. That was a good, like, over 2 hours of stream time. Thanks everyone for joining me, and all of you who will be watching this VOD in the future. Thanks again so much for your support. This comic means a lot to me. Getting the opportunity to create it and share it with the world means a lot to me as well. And every one of you who subscribes, it's just a huge help. Like, I can't understate that at all. You guys have no idea how much I appreciate this. Yeah, I hope to see you around for future projects, both with Where the Strays Roam and beyond. I do have some other ideas and things I'm working on that'll hopefully be making their way down the pipeline this year. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I'll